Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sarah Corbet, and today I, alongside William Clark, Ryan Holloway, and Ritika Roy Chaudhary from the Privy Council Office, will be presenting a new national security policy, Stronger Together, Plus Fort Ensemble, Canadian Agency in a Changing World. Next slide, please. The issues facing Canada's security are broad and multifaceted. In this environment, the most pressing problem is, how can a Canadian national security policy bolster long-term unity and address the immediate and volatile threats from the United States? The solution lies in demonstrating, through unity and stability, that Canada is not an uncertain bet. This means that, first, Canada must improve upon domestic research and development capacities. Second, we must expedite novel trade frameworks to support trade cooperation. And third, we must combat the foreign interference that jeopardizes Canadian unity and sovereignty. Next slide, please. Canada faces national security threats from a number of different origin points with varying degrees of scale, all of which are listed here as our security landscape. Instead of treating them as disconnected phenomena, we have sorted each issue into thematic buckets. The first, continental economic and security threats, concerns those which primarily come from the United States, their current administration, and the uncertainty that they pose. This includes protectionism, Arctic security, issues of politics and sovereignty, and information and cyber-based threats. The second is great power competition and includes concerns regarding Russian, Chinese, and US rivalry in the new multipolar world. The third is human security and social resiliencies, made up of threats related to migration, health, and climate. And the final bucket is international criminal activities, including transnational crime and extremism. Concentrating on a thematic bucket helps to focus Canada's national security policy around clear and present danger, rather than abstract or more long-term issues. Within this landscape of problems, what we are focusing on solving today is how we can work together to build unity and a stronger Canadian national security policy. Next slide, please. Of these buckets, continental, economic, and security threats at the hand of the US pose the most pressing issues in solving the problem for three key reasons: exposure, public responsiveness, and the arc of change. Canada has a unique geopolitical arrangement with the United States, which makes us vulnerable to our geographical proximity and an exposed Arctic, and leaves us highly dependent on economic ties and constant political shifts. The ongoing political instability in the United States is a salient issue influencing Canadian public perception, with beliefs reflecting the idea that the US presents the greatest security threat to Canadians, and hoping for a stronger response to the current administration. Furthermore, the US and its relationship with Canada is unpredictable and rapidly changing, posing a significant risk considering Canadian dependency. As the US has the greatest capacity to impact Canadian affairs, it is critical to insulate Canada from these dynamic shifts and develop stronger international and domestic capabilities. Now I will pass it on to Ryan to further investigate these issues. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Sarah. Here you see a further investigation of each reason for our focus. Our exposure and vulnerability to the US is unique in its comprehensiveness. They remain our largest trading partner, accounting for 63.4% of our trade. We also share the world's longest undefended border, spanning almost 9,000 kilometers. Amid such levels of instability, this entanglement and exposure dwarfs that of any other nation. Now directing you to public responsiveness. Polling as recent as February 18th tells us that 48% of Canadians view the United States as the biggest threat to peace, as opposed to 29% for Russia, 10% for China, and 2% for the EU. Further, 2/3 of Canadians view the US as a threat to our sovereignty. This demonstrates a clear directive from the public for a robust policy to mitigate this threat. As for the arc of change, you can see here evidence of the week-to-week or day-to-day volatility of this US administration. This sample only represents the last 2 months, and yet you see multiple threats and subsequent reversals. Even as the slide deck was being finalized, tariffs were struck down, then reimposed in a matter of hours. A relationship that changes this often is unique to the US. The arc of change for China and Russia is measured in years and decades, while for the US, it's measured in days. A policy for the next 4 years needs to zero in on this clear, present, and volatile threat. Next slide, please. And so we focus our efforts on addressing continental economic and security threats from the US, as they cause the most division and uncertainty for Canadians, partners, and investors alike. To ameliorate these issues, here are the central challenges that Canada must tackle. 1, domestic capacity. 2, cooperative internal and external trade. And 3, combating foreign interference. Within domestic capacity, Canada's defence industrial strategy is tackling the issue of underdevelopment head-on. However, the announced strategy does not yet meet the moment on digital sovereignty and especially innovation. This gap creates structural vulnerability, limits defense autonomy, and increases uncertainty premiums for investors. Second is trade, both internal and international. The challenge here is to push further on the diversification of partnerships and interprovincial cooperation. Continued entanglement with the US only weakens our ability to stand on our own 2 feet. Current frameworks are in place and more are underway, but interprovincial labor markets remain too fragmented and international deals are underutilized and slow to adoption. Lastly, within foreign interference, external actors threaten civic and political unity, especially as separatist movements are encouraged by the United States. Gaps between intelligence detection and enforcement mean that Canada can identify activity, but consequences are not always timely or visible. Weakness in this space impacts immediate concerns with the US and also means we're open to other foreign threats. These three main challenges answer the strategic needs of the next 4 years as a neighbor to the US and also begin to build long-term resilience to volatility in the economic or sovereignty sphere. Next slide, please. Our first pillar concerns improving upon domestic capacities for defense-related innovation. While the new Defense Industrial Strategy, or DIS, offers a comprehensive plan on manufacturing and procurement, innovation and research and development remain afterthoughts. The DIS underfunds the newly introduced Bureau of Research Engineering and Advanced Leadership in Innovation and Science, or Borealis. As such, we propose an increase in the funding of this initiative. Borealis, which received a carve-out of $68.2 million in the DIS, is an imperative vehicle of improving upon innovative and advanced security capacities. Furthermore, the Bureau's projects assist in the development of defense innovation secure hubs, which are foundational to building upon Canada's security capabilities. Expanding Borealis's administrative strength will allow more programs aimed at advancing the industrial and defense-related capabilities of AI, quantum, cyber and secure networks, and other technologies. Our proposal, recognizing the urgency of the identified national security problem, hopes to expedite the Bureau's projects and push Canada's domestic defense capacities forward into the future. Now, William will talk about our second strategy. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Ryan. Our second pillar is on trade cooperation, both internal and international. Given the constant and changing economic threats from the US, a unified approach to trade interprovincially and internationally has begun, but requires further collaborative work. Internally, the Canadian Mutual Recognition Agreement has made impressive strides on lessening trade barriers for most types of goods, but experts agree that gaps in labor mobility are the next step. Through intergovernmental affairs, we will propose a national standard for certification transfer modeled after the Ontario program. What this changes about the current framework is lowering timeframes to a mandatory 10 days for certifications and, crucially, allowing for a work while you wait aspect and deemed approval in your chosen province. It will function as a funding transfer through existing agreements within ESDC to support provincial needs. Now, looking internationally, CETA is currently only being utilized by Canadian small and medium enterprises at 65%, and we propose a utilization program through export development to push that number to 80% initially, with continued support after that. Sectors like zinc, sugar, and cereals are almost at 100%, which tells us that this goal is reachable with proper compliance support from the government. This program goes hand in hand with a diplomatic push through Global Affairs Canada to get holdout EU states onto the agreement, using bilateral engagement as well as leveraging Canada's recent cooperation like that of SAFE. At the same time, Canada needs to make real strides on the EU CPTPP bridge partnership that continues to be, and I quote, cautiously eyed by the nations involved. Through allocation of dedicated negotiating resources, Canada can capitalize on its role as a leader in this middle power movement, as Carney says, and push for a framework agreement as quickly as possible. In the face of constantly changing economic threats, stability here is paramount. And so with these steps, we can help Canadian labor and businesses take full advantage of the current trade reorientation that is already underway and protect ourselves from future US trade shocks through new cooperative ties. Now, Ritika will take you through combating foreign interference. Next slide, please.
Thanks, William. Our third pillar is foreign interference. A potential separatist movement combined with Arctic sovereignty pressures creates a moment where internal division can generate external leverage. From the perspective of US political actors, fragmentation within Canada can strengthen their position in trade, energy, and the Arctic. If instability advances external interests, there is incentive to amplify it through interference, misinformation, and disinformation. Our response is institutional and preventative. The Canadian Sovereign Defence Initiative establishes a permanent foreign interference division within Canadian Security Intelligence Service under Bill C-70, led by Public Safety Canada and supported by the Communications Security Establishment. This makes democratic protection a standing national security function. When foreign-directed political activity is identified, referral to the Transparency Commissioner and registry enforcement follow automatically. Detection leads directly to consequences, reducing delay and strengthening deterrence. Communication Security Establishment, through the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity, provides continuous monitoring of digital interference patterns and supports electoral system protection. Public threat reporting during high-risk democratic periods reduces speculation and narrows the space in which disinformation can operate. The domestic framework ensures provinces receive internal cyber and technical support during referendum periods, reducing reliance on external actors and preserving federal coherence. Participation in cyber and technical supports remain opt-in for provinces, preserving jurisdictional autonomy while strengthening collective security. Together, this replaces fragmented response with coordinated enforcement. It raises the cost of interference, reduces uncertainty, and strengthens political cohesion, which directly supports Canada's leverage in sovereignty domains, including the Arctic. Next slide, please. This implementation timeline moves from immediate setup to sustained enforcement, reflected by the shift from darker to lighter red. Domestic capacity begins in months 0 to 6 with establishing the Borealis Secretariat through staffing and procedural design within existing federal structures, making it administratively feasible. From months 12 to 36, sunset clauses and oversight mechanisms activate, with non-viable projects wound down by months 24 to 36 to ensure fiscal discipline. Feasibility is high because this formalizes coordination and evaluation within existing authorities rather than creating new powers. For trade cooperation, labor mobility targets implementation within 18 months. This is feasible because federal labor credential frameworks already exist. The Canadian Mutual Recognition Agreement followed a comparable timeline, and the labor market transfer and development agreements provide funding and institutional groundwork. The CETA utilization program launches within 6 months, modeled on CAN Export's delivery architecture, making operational rollout realistic. Sustained multi-year support increases SME participation. Foreign interference reforms occur within 12 months by establishing a CSIS Foreign Interference Division and activating Bill C-70 enforcement. Months 12 to 36 transition to full investigations and compliance monitoring. Feasibility is high because CSIS already holds authority, Bill C-70 is enacted, and registry and cyber coordination structures are already operational. Next slide, please. Fiscally, Stronger Together is comprised of the costs associated with our 3 primary pillars. All figures are represented as total sums across 3 years of spending. Improving upon domestic defense capabilities constitutes the largest share of expenditures, with total costs after 3 years rounding to $430 million. Second, combating foreign interference will emerge with a necessary earmark of $135 million or $45 million per annum, added to the combined annual budgetary allocations from CSIS and CSE. Finally, expanding trade cooperation will in aggregate cost $110 million, which will be sourced from existing labor agreements and Strategic Response Fund. In all, Stronger Together can expect to cost $675 million in total. Next slide, please. Each pillar of our policy comes with risks and subsequent strategies for mitigation. Within Pillar 1, a project of this nature may have difficulty attracting talent from academic settings and may result in bureaucratic silos. In response, we must create a Borealis Secretariat to streamline decisions and act as a liaison for joint collaboration with institutions of higher learning in Canada. Within Pillar 2, labor mobility MOUs are signed between Ontario and most provinces, but Quebec continues to hold out, citing language requirement concerns. To mitigate this risk and bring Quebec on board, we create carve-outs for French language requirements for Quebec. Also within this pillar, there exists risks to the CETA utilization program. Low uptake of federal programs is common, and administrative burden to SMEs is not a small issue. To combat this, the program will include funding for customs administration help for navigating compliance, which can be digitized for smaller or more straightforward claims. Within the final pillar, enforcement delays create risks as it can appear easier for foreign actors to interfere in democratic processes and civic life. To mitigate this risk, we establish automatic referral triggers with clear enforcement timelines, coordinated oversight, and public reporting during democratic cycles. William will now walk us through how these three pillars operate together. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Ritika. So, how does this multi-pillar strategy work in tandem to address the pressing threats of the United States to Canada's national security? Each pillar of the Stronger Together strategy responds to specific threats within the thematic bucket, and all in all, they create a unified Canada and a stable Canada. It signals that just because the US seeks to withdraw from a global world and be a bastion of uncertainty, that doesn't mean that we must capitulate or follow suit. It signals not a return to the 1930s, but a reorientation of where cooperation lies, within our own borders and through increased partnerships with more stable trading blocs. It shows that Canada is a safe bet. Specifically, we fill capacity gaps from the DIS, we push for cooperation in trade both at home and abroad, and we support our ability to prevent foreign interference and address it as necessary. Collectively, we show that stronger together means unity and stability. Next slide, please. In communicating this to the public, we approach this from the center of government. As members of the Privy Council Office, we use the framing that stronger together means unity and stability as the coordinating principle across departments and provinces. We are taking a whole of government approach. Prime Minister Carney anchors the unity narrative, while responsible ministers deliver pillar-specific updates within their mandates. Security and intelligence agencies provide technical credibility, and provincial partners reinforce our alignment. Delivery is sequenced and tied to measurable milestones. Foreign interference updates are communicated through formal threat assessments and registry reporting, while trade and capacity reforms are linked to economic indicators. This maintains credibility, reduces politicization, and reinforces Canada as coordinated and stable amid external pressures. Next slide, please. And so to summarize, Stronger Together is comprised of these three pillars with a clear overarching goal. In order to reduce uncertainty and strengthen Canadian unity in the face of the US threat, we improve domestic research capacity, we expedite novel trade frameworks, and we combat foreign interference. Thank you, everyone, et merci à tous.
Thank you so much. We are sort of halfway through, and it's always hard to be the halfway through group. It's obvious you put a lot of work in this, and you didn't have a lot of time, and it's very obvious the level of collaboration, the thoughtfulness you put in it. So we're very, very thankful for what you've shown us today. I'm going to pass over the first question to Christina. Some elements around communications and public support. So Christina.
Absolutely. So thank you very much for your presentation. I definitely appreciate the communications and key speaking points you have there. In hearing your presentation, some of the key things that stand out to me is particularly around labor mobility. So I'm going to have you drill down on that piece. Can you articulate what stakeholders you think would be involved, how you would address their concerns, and how might they actually push back on this to make this a reality? Because this is something that has been pushed forward for a while and it hasn't happened yet. So why not?
Yes, thank you so much for that question. The CMRA, which was just passed through these last few months with regard to goods, not labor trade, took about 18 months of groundwork that we are prepared to take for this as well. And you're right that we have unique issues in this space. One of the main ones is Quebec. There's also holdout from Newfoundland as well. Ontario has bilateral MOUs on this issue with every other province, the 8 other provinces, not the territories, except for Newfoundland and Quebec. So Newfoundland's stated issues right now are the fact that they want to keep this within the Maritimes. They want to keep labor mobility out east, and Quebec's stated issues are the language requirements. Of course, we did mention that we will create a language carve-out for Quebec there to get them on board. As for Newfoundland, this is where our messaging comes in. This is where the provinces banding together is the strongest mitigation we have against the US economic threat. So through this extreme push through the foreign labor minister, the Forum of Labor Market Ministers. In that negotiating space, we need to be on message about why we are doing this. It is not for the benefit of BC. It's not for the benefit of Alberta. It's for the benefit of every single province and every single labor market within that province. That's how we're going to mitigate those risks there.
Are there any other stakeholders you need to be mitigating or addressing and engaging with?
Yes, absolutely. So regulatory bodies are a big one there. So within the funding, we have allocated funding towards coordination of regulatory bodies. Every single province has a different regulatory body for a different industry. That is the main issue in the stakeholder side of things. So a lot of that funding is going towards coordination.
That's it, Christina? Beautiful. I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Craig, with some expertise around public support and how we collaborate and issues around international. Craig?
Thanks, Noah. Yeah, I'll look a little bit closer just at the international trade dimension, and you quite rightly point out the need of working with other countries, diversifying trade, how that may play back in sort of economic security considerations. So you've identified CETA, and I'm just wondering how you zeroed in on CETA as opposed to, say, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and how that plays out in the security space. So there's a diversification issue and searching out global markets and where Canadian exports can find those global markets in greater volumes than before. But also there's that aspect of working together with other countries where trade agreements can facilitate that. So can you just expand on that a bit, and then also just add how this would be done, because it wasn't entirely clear who would lead that within the government in terms of this effort to try to leverage our trading relationships more than we've done today.
Yes, absolutely. So CETA was identified due to the specific gap there, the 35% utilization gap, which equates to over 400 million lost in tariffs per year, according to Global Affairs Canada. So that gap that was identified is a priority for us because it is only about 1,500 to 3,000 SMEs, small and medium enterprises within Canada. That to us was a clear directive that we could have for the next 3 to 4 years of this volatility, hoping, of course, that things change. But if we are creating that strength right now, it provides that strength continued. If these threats do not change, if a new American administration is the same, if a threat comes from somewhere else that we are not looking at right now economically. So building that out was the reasoning behind that, because it was something that we could implement right now. And could you remind me of your second question? I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Just who would lead that effort within the government in terms of how to leverage those partnerships more, and who might they work with within the government as well?
Okay, so Global Affairs Canada is obviously an externally facing body. So Global Affairs Canada will be engaging in the bilateral talks and multilateral talks on that end. But within Canada, the TSF, the Trade Commissioner, has right now support for these companies, but only if the companies come to us. So TCS will be leading that outreach within Canada, as well as I have it here. Just one second. As well as export development, of course. So TCS and export development will be working in tandem to lead that outreach to the SMEs within Canada. Global Affairs Canada will be doing the diplomatic work on the outside.
Thank you.
My colleague Kim has some specialization in for information and technology. I'm going to pass the next question over to her.
Great, thanks, and thanks for your presentation. Just a couple of questions. Your Canadian Sovereignty Defense Initiative, has a focus on public threat reporting. And I'm just wondering if you've given any thought to how you'll prevent that process from being politicized or weaponized during high-risk periods when you can see foreign interference narratives potentially being used to destabilize public trust. So we'd be curious on your thoughts on that. And then a related question on national unity and social cohesion, which you've talked about. I'm wondering how you would maintain national cohesion if provinces disagree with your federal approaches to labor mobility, to the enforcement of foreign interference, or to your defense research priorities.
Thank you for your question. I'll actually start with the second one first. So let's say, for example, like historically, provinces like Quebec normally choose not to be part of all of this. So in the event like Quebec chooses not to opt in, um, even if Quebec declines direct like federal cyber support, Canada's national cyber agencies would still monitor foreign threats across the country, and this would force Quebec to accept support. Um, this would forcing Quebec to accept support could fuel separatist tensions, which foreign actors would exploit. And like this opt-in model that is there within the defense initiative protects Quebec's autonomy while maintaining federal threat detection active nationwide. And in terms of how this can like not be weaponized, so in the event that like Canada confirms foreign government is secretly influencing politics and hasn't registered, the case will automatically be handed to um, police within like a fixed time frame. And in this way, like escalation moves to the RCMP National Security Enforcement Teams, and any charges are decided by the Independent Public Prosecution Service of Canada, with judicial oversight throughout the process, preventing partisan misuse.
Thank you.
I'll just quickly build
Vincent,
upon Ritika's. My
apologize.
apologies.
Go ahead.
My apologies. Just to add, in terms of our disinformation and combating that misinformation issue, I wanted to point out as well that we will be ensuring that the CSIS Foreign Interference Division will explicitly have disinformation as part of its broader interference mandate and directly targeting that in its approach to ensure that we are ready for these kinds of issues and these high-risk periods throughout Canada. And with our increased domestic research capacity and the expansions that will allow us, it will be something that will have better capability for and be more prepared to handle. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Vincent?
Thanks, Noah. One of the things we always say when it comes to developing a strategy is to have priorities and to really focus as much as possible. So I have to say that of all the presentations we've seen so far, yours probably has the most focus because you basically said, listen, there are these 3 or 4 threats out there, but we actually say that the US is the biggest threat and that they're the existential threat to Canada. And you put together a national security strategy, which is basically aimed at the United States. And that's what you say. I think a lot of Canadians, that'll probably resonate with them, but a lot of Canadians will also say, well, what about Russia? What about China? What about climate change? What about domestic extremism? And all those overlap with some of the threats that you've got in the first basket when it comes to disinformation and things like that. Threats to the Arctic come from Russia and China as well. So how do you explain that if somebody comes back and says, well, that's great, it's all about the US. We understand everyone's ticked off for the US right now, but what about all this other stuff? This is supposed to be a national security strategy to make Canada safe across the board. How do you sell that?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of responding to the US, I think, as we've mentioned, that's something we're going to be really prioritizing in our communication strategy. But when people do come back and say, oh, what about Russia? What about China? The best thing that we can say is that in building up our response to the United States, in building our capacity to handle those threats, we will simultaneously be building that same capacity that can be used to mitigate threats from these other countries. In terms of the interference threats that might be posed by China, it's the same technology that will go into how we counter the US to China. So it's not something that we're excluding in our response. By building up this capacity and targeting it at our immediate threat coming from the United States, we're also more able to manage and mitigate threats that are coming from Russia and China. So that will be the way that we would approach it.
Thank you.
We only have a few seconds left, so not much time to ask a question, but possibly a comment around allies. And is there a component of your strategy that deals with other allies? You mentioned Europe.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. We just comment that our strategy positions Canada not only as an insulated defensive posturing nation, but also one which is improving its capacity to assist in allied interfacing. And so our effective strategy here is, in essence, both a way to improve upon the domestic capabilities of Canada to counter its immediate threat from the United States, but also to participate actively and effectively in our multilateral partnerships abroad.
Okay, we'll have
Thank
to
you
end
so.
it there. Thank you very much.